I want to introduce myself. My name is Lindsay Nielsen, and I'm the Marketing Manager at EcoEngineers. Welcome to our webinar on the new and improved Canada Clean Fuel Regulations. Our teams have been doing a lot of research since the announcement earlier this year, and we have hired a political strategist based in Ottawa who we hear from during this webinar. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Lisa Hankey is our newly hired Regulatory Engagement Director with nearly 2 decades of experience in advising companies, government, and environmental groups on sustainability issues and international clean fuel policies. She's also based in Ottawa, which is boots on the ground for the CFR. And then Ethanol Services Director Mark Heckman is on board too. He has been working in the ethanol agriculture industry for decades and has been spearheading our internal research on the updated regulation. So before we start the presentation, there's going to be a short video about EcoEngineers and a message from our CEO, Shashi Menon, on how we can help you. Enjoy.
Carbon is the biggest disruptor of the 21st century, and the world as we know it is changing. EcoEngineers can guide you to make the best decisions as you navigate toward your clean energy goals. Our diverse team of carbon analysts, engineers, scientists, auditors, and regulatory specialists are trusted advisors of the clean energy fuel sectors worldwide. Clean energy regulations are a maze. We simplify them with an unbiased approach and fully manage your compliance. Modeling your carbon reduction is complicated. We quantify your emissions with a rigor based in science. Together, we can create markets that will protect and grow your investment. We create sustainable solutions for a better tomorrow. We are EcoEngineers.
Hi, I'm Shashi Menon, a CEO of EcoEngineers. That video you just saw is EcoEngineers in a nutshell. We're a team of consultants, auditors, engineers, and scientists with deep expertise in low-carbon fuels, emerging technologies, and policies that are helping decarbonize the world. We are at the heart of the energy transition. At EcoEngineers, we are laser-focused on aiding, assisting, and supporting this transition to a clean energy economy. Through our education programs, our science-based approach to life cycle carbon analysis, through our asset development support, our engagement with policymakers, and through our compliance management and auditing teams, we provide a 360 approach to usher in the clean energy transition. The ultimate success of low-carbon fuel projects, and ultimately the future of our planet, depends on the successful execution of net zero goals. And that's exactly what our team is here to help you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashi. EcoEngineers is excited about the possibilities with the Canada market. Canada is all in and committing several $1 billion to the resources to increase renewable fuels consumption and production. Canada's focus and dedication of resources is creating projects, 56 of them is estimated by Advanced Biofuels Canada, with a national focus that complements the provincial legislation already in place, and they're ready to begin this process today. With this webinar, we will provide a general overview of the CFR and expect to stimulate ideas that will encourage participants in this market, which we think has the ability to generate revenues for you. As well as Canada being all in, ECO, as you can see, is also all in. I want to introduce Lisa Hankey, Director of Regulatory Engagement and a resident of Canada, to step through our process and how you can begin to participate in this valuable market. Lisa?
Thanks so much, Mark. The publication of the Canadian Clean Fuel Regulation has been long awaited, and though not ideal to many, most can agree that it is a big step forward toward Canada meeting its plans to cut national emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030 from 2005 levels. First introduced in 2016 by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's newly elected Liberal government, the plan initially was to include liquid, gaseous, and solid fuels. The clean fuel regulation we see today is focused on liquid fuels with a paced trajectory reaching 16 million tons of CO2 equivalent savings by 2030. Environment and Climate Change Canada, affectionately known as ECCC, has said that gaseous fuels will be added at a later date, eventually followed by solid fuels. Though this regulation was introduced by the Liberal government, the other three main political parties in Canada have largely supported the regulation in recent months, even if they all have ideas on how to improve it. Regulatory certainty in renewable fuels is a bit of an oxymoron. However, the consensus in Canada seems to be that the CFR is here to stay. Now let's dive a little deeper to the ins and outs of the CFR. The following 4 slides are available upon request, so please reach out to the ECO team to obtain a copy. A primary supplier, perhaps better known as an obligated party, the annual reduction requirements is calculated on a company-wide basis, summing up the reduction requirements per liquid fossil fuel type for each of the company's production facilities and for their total imports. This is based on the energy content of fossil fuel. The CFR allows primary suppliers to meet their obligations using 3 different compliance categories. The first is to reduce the CI of the fossil fuel itself. This can be done using CCS, renewable electricity, RNG, or co-processing. Primary suppliers can use credits from compliance category 1 to satisfy up to 10% of their annual obligations. The second category is to replace fossil fuel with a low CI alternative, such as ethanol or biodiesel. This category will make up the bulk of the annual obligations, as it must account for a minimum of 80% of compliance credits. This category is where ethanol producers, biodiesel producers, and marketers of renewable fuels fall in. Third category is end fuel switching in transportation. It allows for retrofitting a fossil fuel combustion device to be powered by another fuel or energy source, such as EVs or hydrogen. This also has a 10% annual limit on compliance credits that can be generated. Each primary supplier must lower the CI of their fuel using compliance credits. Compliance credits are the only way to meet obligations. During each compliance period, the primary supplier must use the number of credits necessary to meet their reduction obligations. Credits can be created by primary suppliers themselves or can be transferred to them by other registered creators. This slide provides an overview of the application and reporting requirements of the CFR. My colleague Mark will discuss this a bit more later in the presentation. For those of you familiar with the California LCFS, you'll notice that the structure is quite similar. The process starts with the registration of the facility. Next, a CI application that needs to be validated is completed. The CI is then certified by ECCC. The next requirement is completing the quarterly reporting, at which time credit creation can begin. Finally, there's an annual reporting requirement, which includes a CI data update. Starting in 2024, there's an obligation to have fuel transactions and CI data verified by a certified third-party verifier. Here we have a summary of key CFR actions and start dates. As you can see, the registration of facilities has already begun, and the program as outlined today will be in full force January 1st, 2024. These graphs outline the CI limits and reduction requirements through to 2030 for both the CFR and the California LCFS in gasoline and diesel pool. The gray line represents the LCFS and the blue line is the CFR. You can see at the top of each chart the baseline CI for the fossil fuel under the CFR. This was calculated specifically for Canadian fossil fuels and includes data from imports. As mentioned before, the CI limit comes into force on July 1st, 2023. As you can see, Canada has set its targets to align quite closely with California. The LCA methodologies used are different, which may contribute to the variations. ECCC has developed its own LCA model called OpenLCA. EcoEngineers has run a few scenarios in OpenLCA and then ran the same in GREET 3.0, which is used by California. The results generally have been within a few CI points, but this is very facility specific. Canada has set an option for a facility specific CI and a temporary CI, which is also similar to the California approach. Carbon intensity is calculated using life cycle analysis. LCA is an analytical method for estimating the total quantity of greenhouse gases emitted during a full fuel life cycle. In general, the CI includes the direct effects of producing and using the fuel, as well as any indirect effects that may be associated with the fuel. Components of an LCA calculation done for the CFR are feedstock extraction or cultivation and transportation, fuel production, compression or liquefaction, production of the electricity used, and the transportation of the end product. Finally, fuel combustion is included. OpenLCA has fixed values for feedstocks. In some instances, reductions could be made if the GHG savings are demonstrated. However, this is the required baseline by feedstock. To compare to California, where corn has a CI of 32.89, and then on top of that, an ILUC factor valued at 19 points, the Canadian CI for corn is 35. The list of waste feedstocks is quite consistent with other similar regulations, including things like MSW, fats, and oils. Now let's take a look at other biofuel mandates or regulations within Canada. Almost all provinces have some level of a volumetric renewable fuel requirement. Some, like Alberta and Ontario, have a GHG component integrated as well. For example, in Alberta, 5% of the gasoline pool must contain renewable fuel. This renewable fuel must have a 25% GHG savings over its fossil counterpart. Canada also has federal volumetric renewable fuel mandate, 5% in gasoline and 2% in diesel. This regulation has been incorporated into the CFR. Finally, the province of BC has an RFS as well as an LCFS, which is quite aligned with the California program. The next slides are also available to anyone who's interested. Please just reach out to someone from the ECO team and we'll be happy to help. Here we compare key components of the CFR to the US RFS. I won't go through each of these points, but some of the key differences are that the RFS is a volumetric mandate, where the obligations are set on an annual basis or every 2 years. Now, this may get extended in the reset, however, that remains to be seen. The CFR is based on carbon intensity reductions that have been set out until 2030. Another key difference is around feedstock and product. The RFS has a very specific list of feedstocks that can be used. The CFR takes a feedstock and product agnostic approach. The registration processes generally align, but at this point it seems the CFR process will be simpler. If a pathway doesn't exist in the CFR, ECCC is open to adding new ones when they do updates, if it's warranted. Finally, the programs use different LCA models to determine the CI of the fuel, as discussed earlier. This table examines the California LCFS versus the Canadian CFR. In this table, we're able to see that at their core, these programs are quite similar. Some key differences to highlight are the different baseline CIs for fossil fuel and the different LCA models that the programs use. Another key difference is that the Canadian CFR takes a more neutral approach, where California often sets rules that favor facilities within the state. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Mark to talk next steps.
Thanks, Lisa. So what are your next steps? There are several things you can do today to position yourself for this market. One, Lisa highlighted a lot of information. If you're interested in the PDFs she spoke of, please reach out following this webinar. Two, ask questions and begin to get your facility registered if you have not already. And do what you can to understand the process and the applications. July 2023 is just around the corner. And if you want to participate in that market, there are parameters and things that you must do in order to do that. And although the process is open and meant for facilities to work direct, the process can be burdensome, and ECO stands ready to support your efforts in the same way that we support other LCFS programs. And when complications or special conditions play into this, we're here to help. As we look at the locations of the ethanol plants in the US, Many plants are well positioned to serve this market. And as you heard from Lisa, the Canada market is open and ready to accept applications. How can we help? We have boots on the ground in Canada, and we're focused on supporting all the efforts by Canada and the US to increase the renewable fuels. Our experience with pathways, regulatory engagement, compliance, in general, monitoring, reporting, and validation, and our commitment to the customer's success are the primary reasons customers look to us for assistance. We're excited about the market in Canada and look forward to hearing from you for your interest in this market as well. If you have a project you're considering, we'd love to hear from you. This journey to a clean energy world can be challenging. We're here to help, and any area in blue or orange is a place where we can help you with your success. Also note, in this situation, some facilities, even before they get to this process, are looking to ECO for preliminary CI calculations. The second point to note is that consulting and audit functions cannot be completed by the same company. So decide as you begin this process on a consultant and on an audit company, and even in the preliminary calculations and assistance with that would be consideration or could be consideration for a conflict of interest. We're sincerely appreciative of all the interest in this. We appreciate your time today, and we're going to open this up for questions and answers.
So we do have a lot of questions here that are coming in, a lot about the anticipated credit pricing. Do we know what that could look like for each compliance category?
The pricing is mostly still to be determined. There's a little bit of information on it, but at this point, they're waiting for the program to get started. So if anyone has wants any information that is available, please feel free to reach out.
Going to the registration aspect, there someone is asking, there's no tier 1 and tier 2 systems like with the LCFS application. Is that correct?
It is correct that there is an ability to do a preliminary CI.
A lot of stacking questions too. So what, you guys get a sneak preview. That is going to be our next webinar on just what kind of credits you can stack onto each other and what projects are most lucrative in that respect. But for now, what do we know what kind of credits can be stacked on top of the CFR?
No, I was just going to say BC is indeed stackable.
But there is a difference between, you know, you can't gain credits both on fuel that you're shipping. You can't gain US RFS credits on fuel you're shipping to Canada and vice versa.
That's correct, yeah.
How about, here's another one. Can you elaborate on any restrictions under the CFR and credit generation regarding transport of RNG across multiple provinces or states?
I think that's a question that we should probably take offline. It's getting quite into the weeds, but
Definitely.
we'd be happy to help out with that one.
Most of the focus in the rules right now has been on the liquid biofuels, and much of the gaseous is, like you say, is yet to come. I will also, Lindsay, I want to circle back on the credit generation and the stacking. I'd certainly take that question up with your tax consultants. So for instance, all the new tax credits that are coming out in the Inflation Reduction Act, it talks about biofuels production in the Inflation Reduction Act. And so there may be some stackable characteristics in that where if you are selling into Canada, you can still claim the tax credits in the US. I'm not certain of that or how those are handled. So I'd certainly suggest reaching out to a tax consultant.
Some questions about the similarities between CI scores between Green Open LCA and LCA in general. Can you speak a little bit to what the similarity looks like for the different fuel types? and what might cause those differences?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different components. We have run several scenarios in several different models. We're not seeing huge differences, but it really is facility specific. Things like the electricity that you're using, all energy input, transportation. So it's important to make sure that you look at your facility specifically to see how it compares.
Great. Also talking about open LCA, is there how does that work? Is there an Excel file for something that mimics it that you can test it out, or do you have to download the software? I do know that open LCA kind of is reflective of its name, right? So everybody can use it. It's a free software. Do you have any other thoughts about that, Mark?
I'll let Lisa also comment, but in general, open LCA, it's very similar to the California GREET model, or even GREET. It's an open platform in this case, but more open for the application process. But just because there are nuances and complications in certain plants and situations, that's where, even though it being an open LCA platform, people tend to get guidance in situations, and that's where our team shines, especially if you get into what might be a tier 2 situation. That's where we can help walk through that and present to the ECCC. Lisa, anything to add? Certainly.
I think you covered it, Mark. Open LCA is available online. I believe it's on the ECCC website, so you can try and download it. But as Mark said, we're also here to help. I'm not aware of any other programs that mimic it at this point.
But, the point of reference, it's a really good question of, if we can do it ourselves, why don't we? And that's the case of, it depends on your level of confidence and your level of expertise. And reaching out to somebody like ECO is, that's the space we're in. And if you're in the space of production and need somebody to help you, guide you through that, that's what we do.
I just see another question on open LCA model, whether it's complete and ready, and it is indeed. Yeah.
That was the one I was going to hit next too. There's a question about timelines. Like, at what point should the facility start to think about becoming registered if they're not online yet, or if they are online? Do we want to go back to the key dates slide in the presentation to kind of go over that a little bit, or?
We can certainly do that. I would say, unless the facility isn't going to be up and running for quite some time, I think the time is now. In terms of looking at your preliminary CI and beginning the process.
Yeah, it takes time for all of it. And if you are shipping into Canada, there are some requirements that are in place, and they're on the screen there. July 1.
We have a couple more minutes here. Here's a question we might need to take offline, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can a U.S. entity with no operations in Canada send qualifying renewable fuels to Canada and generate markets? So can a brand new fuel provider send fuel under this regulation?
My understanding is, as long as they're registered and they meet the LCA CI requirements, that yes, they can.
Will there be temporary CI pathways available for application?
There are. There aren't very many though. But my understanding is that they're going to be doing an update to the model in 2024, I believe. So at that point, they'll be adding.
I think it's worth noting that the 90 days production data is thought to be part of that temporary pathway, or their first original part of that.
Can we speak a little bit to the baseline? I know internally there were some questions about this baseline CI for feedstock production. Lisa, can you speak to how ECCC is planning on handling the feedstock CI?
So this is a baseline CI for the various feedstocks. California has a similar idea, but there are things that facilities can do to get credits in place of activities that they're doing that are going to lower their CI. So there is opportunity there to reduce these numbers. So yeah.
Perfect.
And province-specific CIs can also be obtained with longer data.
So this is kind of a follow-up. In terms of feedstock usage, do you expect the majority of feedstocks for biodiesel being canola or soybean oil, or a food crop of waste-based feedstock? I mean, can we even predict that?
That's in the area of speculation. I mean, Lisa, I'll let you take a jump on some of that, but just we see a lot of canola in Canada, soy oil based, just from that area. But it's the food waste, I can't say.
I'm just reading, there's a question about whether whether you can use a renewable book and claim for the calculation of your CI. And I believe that the answer is no, except I think there are a few exceptions. Please reach out to us if you want to talk about it in more detail. I think hydrogen is one of those exceptions.
And I think that about rounds out our short style webinars. Thank you very much, Lisa and Mark, for joining us today and providing your knowledge on the topic. When you leave the webinar, there will be a pop-up for you to do a survey for us. Please let us know how we did and if you have any suggestions in future webinars. And then you'll get a follow-up email with a link for who to email if you have questions. We will be providing some of these PDFs upon request. So if you would like some of the PDFs, including the comparison between the CFR and the RFS and the CFR and the LCFS and some of the compliance category tables, we will be giving those out if you want to shoot us a note. So thank you everybody for participating, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, all.